So today I want to welcome you to Real Feel Insights. We're going to do things a little bit different today. We're going to talk a little bit about Real Feel Insights, and then also I am going to be, I guess, my own guest today. And I think just talking a little bit about what has made me who I am and different things that I've gone through in life. So just maybe getting to know your host. We've had 12 episodes with Real Feel Insights, so I'm very excited about that. It is a little bit different when you start a podcast or a social media thing like this, that opposed to like when you have like a brick and mortar business. When you start a business and it's where people actually come to your location and purchase things, they have something tangible in their hand. They came to you to get it, to buy it, and purchase it from you. Where when you do something like this, like a podcast, you don't get that instant feedback or like, oh, they came to us today. Let's just pick a restaurant. They really like your food. They like the atmosphere there, so they're gonna visit your your food establishment, and you know that they like that because they either they come back to it or they will tell you that that they enjoyed it. With social media and with a podcast that I've started, you don't get that instant feedback. So you have to truly, really believe in why you're doing this. And I always go back when I start to get a little fearful of what I'm doing or question some things. I always go back to the main purpose of why I started Real Feel Insights. And that is just simply to be able to help one person. If I can help one person relate to them for what they're going through at that moment, or let somebody know that, wow, if she or he, a guest of mine had gone through something and they survived it, and a death of a loved one, a divorce, a bankruptcy, different things that we've already had on our podcast, if those things can help you get you through that time, and it's relatable and it helps, that is why we're doing this, why I started this in the first place. It's very real. It comes from the heart. My guests, they speak from the heart. They are my heroes because when somebody comes on as a guest, they have to be vulnerable. They're sharing some of their most intimate and darkest moments in their lives and how they process some of their situations that they've been through. So truly, my guests are my heroes, and they're the ones that are really making this happen. So I'm very, very thankful of that. But back to being able to keep going with Real Feel Insights is just simply that I believe that this is something that is extremely important right now in our society. I don't think people communicate as much as they used to, visiting and being honest and, sitting down with a cup of coffee or, just sharing some of their struggles and successes or what works for them. So I think this is something that's extremely important that we need to do and be open and vulnerable and, just being honest. And that's the real reason and the real purpose behind Real Feel Insights. I am so glad that you are watching and that you, that you're here. I appreciate it very much. So 12 episodes that we've accomplished and that we've aired already on Real Feel Insights. I hope you're enjoying it. I have learned so much along the way, and every single guest, I have taken an incredible amount of, information, just taken so much. I guess I gained strength knowing how others have weathered some tough storms and what they maybe chose to do or how they did it. And it really has helped me immensely. So I hope it has helped you as well. So today, it's just kind of getting to know your host. I am going to become very vulnerable. There's lots of things that maybe you perhaps don't even know about me. So we'll just start with that. And I actually feel a little uncomfortable today because I enjoy hearing other people's stories. I love to hear. I have always been a great listener, and so to me, today, for me to be in this position, it's a little difficult for me to do this. But I also think that it's important for you to get to know your host. So that's what we're going to do. I grew up in central Minnesota on a large farm. When I say a large farm, I mean like a crop farm and also an animal farm. So I am a farm girl by nature. I love outside. I love wildlife, and I'm very thankful that I did have that upbringing. I grew up in a large family as well. I was number 6 of 8, and I'm I'm very grateful I had that upbringing and that childhood. We we grew up. I remember being number 6 of 8. Some of the older ones, you know, during my teen years were out of the house already. But some of my earlier childhood memories were sitting around the table, and we would say the good and the bad of the day as a family, and we all had our certain spots, and we ate the meat and the potatoes and the vegetable like the Midwesterners always do. So and I also remember vividly some of the Bible stories that were read. My dad would always read from the Bible in the evening, or in the morning before breakfast or whatever. So I'm very, very thankful that I did have that that Christianity. A lot of those Bible stories I learned as a child, and I'm very, very thankful that I did have that. And also growing up on a farm, I had a great work ethic. There are some things that I wish that I could have changed, but as a child, we're born into a family, and there's nothing really that a person can do about some of the things. At an early age, I can remember one of my very first memories. I was sexually abused by my dad, and that was pretty much throughout my entire childhood. And so that was extremely difficult for me to work through. Can you imagine sitting at a table, a child, and listening to your dad, read from the Bible, and like in the morning before we would go to school, and then knowing that he had molested you the night before. So that was difficult, and to work through. I had never really told anybody about that for many years, and it did go through my childhood. Again, I'm very happy with the work ethic, that we had. There was, or that as a farm kid that we had, but we did work from morning till night, and there was probably a lot more responsibility put on me, or I'm only going to speak from my perspective. I remember cooking for 6, 7, 8 men. My parents were gone a lot when I was in my teenage years. I would have to stay home from school, so I fell behind in school, and because I had to stay home and cook for all those men. That's probably where I, learned how to do a lot of that basic cooking. So I am very thankful for a lot of things, but there was some very, I would say, dysfunctional things that I had to deal with in my childhood. There was an excessive amount of abuse, physical abuse. That's how we had to work. I mean, you didn't question things, you didn't ask why, you did, or we would get lickings with belts and hoses and things like that. So there's a lot of good, because and discipline is good, but also at the same token, too much is then it becomes abuse. So anyways, I just wanted to start you as a child, where I did come from and how it was for me to grow up in that home. Very thankful for a lot of things and very appreciative for a lot of things. So when I talk about our childhood shaping us with my guests, I did a tremendous amount of counseling, in my adult life, and our childhood definitely shapes us. If we like it or if we don't like it, whatever it was, it does. It shapes us. And when you have the abuses that I had, a lot of that stuff does come into our adult life. And if we don't work through that, and you're often going to hear me say and talk about processing, I have had to do a tremendous amount of processing in my life, and processing childhood trauma and dysfunction is not a luxury. I mean, it's a priority, and it's extremely important. There was something I had written down here many years ago that I read this, and I kept this. Sharing my story is not seeking attention. Actively processing our childhood wounds openly and without shame is not living in the past. It is how I am healing, and it is the bravest thing that we have to do as adults. Author unknown. So just remember that as we go through life and things come up about our childhood. Why do I do something? Why do we do something? It was probably because something in our childhood, made us think that that's how we should do it. And if you don't know something different, you don't know it. So, processing that stuff to me, I think is very, very critical. And, going back to Real Feel Insights, I do firmly believe that processing with a friend, with somebody else, talking things over, I think it's extremely important, and I think that's a lot of the reason why I did start Real Feel Insights is because of a lot of the processing that I had to do. So one of the, I would say, very unique things that happened to me in my life, and when I say it happened to me, it's a choice you make for most people, getting married, but for me and the upbringing that I came from, it really wasn't a choice, but it actually turned out to be probably one of the best blessings in my entire life. So I was 17. It was in between my junior and senior year in high school. And I had met my husband. Actually, I was 16 when I met him. And for whatever reason, we just both really, really were attracted to each other. It was just, he was such a gentleman, and he always would call me Laura Ingalls Wilder. He just loved my country, just type of, I love to do, country things, and, I grew up on a farm, so he really liked that aspect of me, the hard work ethic. He must have picked up on that rather quickly. So my husband and I had dated for probably about 4 or 5 months, and my parents did not know that we were dating. And when I told them that we were dating and that we were having a sexual relationship, that I told my mother that, and she said that I had to get married. And so that was on a Sunday when I told my my mother that that was what was taking place, and on Tuesday I was married. But because of their belief, now you can kind of imagine the dysfunction that was taking place. So I was being molested by my dad, but then because they found out I was having sex with my husband-to-be and that I had to get married, it was confusing. But again, like I said, it's one of the best blessings that ever happened to me because it did get me out of the home. They didn't know this, but I and my husband had really truly fallen in love already in that 4 to 5 months that we were dating. And we really got to know each other, and we were going to go down to South Dakota because there wasn't a waiting period in South Dakota, which is only like 2 or 3 hours from where I live, and get a marriage license, come back, and then we'd have a small family wedding. But when my husband and I got down to South Dakota, we realized at the courthouse that they said that if you get a marriage license in South Dakota, you need to get married in South Dakota. So once we found that out, we And remember, I had to have my parents go to the courthouse, the local courthouse in our county, and sign for me because I was 17 years old. And so we had taken off, went down to South Dakota, realized at that point that we needed to get married in South Dakota with a South Dakota marriage license. And across the street was a church, and we kind of both looked at each other and said, let's do it. Let's do it. This is what we wanted, and we didn't know how really it was going to work. So it was really an answer to both of our prayers. And so I drove down there, and on the way back, I was married. And I really, I know it's strange, I know it's unique, but to me, and a lot of you know now that I lost my husband in 2021 to COVID, I look back on that and I think of how special that was, being married very young and growing together through my life with him was more than special. So I'm very, very thankful, but it's very, very unique. It brought its own set of challenges, being married young. At 17, you're not really mentally mature of a lot of things. So it did have some challenges, but with those challenges, we also grew extremely close, together, and we kind of grew up together. So after being married and becoming Sarah Bachmann, we had moved away for about 8 months to a year and just kind of established our relationship as a married couple. And that probably was the most fun time of my life during that time. I worked for Pizza Hut. I was a waitress during that time, and then Brad did construction throughout that. Then we moved back to the area. For the first year of our marriage, Brad wanted children, and right away. And we actually couldn't have any children. It just, every cycle came 2, 3, 4, 5 months, and we were not getting pregnant. And then it was exactly to the year that I was going to go in and just, see if what was happening or why we couldn't have any children. And the doctor came back and said I was pregnant. So we were elated, absolutely elated. It was very, very exciting. And then our second, we got pregnant right away, and we were so excited about that. Third, we were so blessed. And I then even closer than a year was pregnant with number 4. And then I was like, I think that we can definitely have have children. And so, we had number 4 in there. And then again, I was pregnant, and we were just very blessed, very, very blessed with that. They were all healthy children, and how fortunate were we at that time. But at the same time, that's hard on, it's hard on a marriage. It's hard on, my body. I was up and down with, hormones, and so that was a trying time in our marriage and in our life. And then on top of that, in that time, we started our business, and we didn't have any background in the meat industry at all. But the only thing that we kind of fell into it with is just simply because when we moved back after we were gone for that year, the very first year, we got 500 baby chicks. And we thought we were farmers, and we were very excited about that, and we were going to just raise them up and then process them and sell them and make just a little extra money. And with me being pregnant, I really wanted to know what was going into my body. So a lot of those components are why we even started, with buying chickens and, raising our own food. So that was the very first year we got 500 chicks, processed them all, and sold them. In fact, we oversold. The second year, I think we got 1,000 baby chicks, and we did the same exact thing. We raised them, we processed them right here on our country farm here, and we sold every single one of them again. And then the next year, people started bringing their birds to us on our place here, and it wasn't, we were using a garden hose, it was just not sanitary. And in our local town, there was a meat locker that had been closed for probably about 6-7 years. And we purchased that. It was closed down. We had that much of meat industry history in our background. Business, again, remember, I was a high school dropout, so we didn't have that. My husband was in construction, so he knew how to build and things, but nothing with the meat industry, nothing with processing, animals, or sausages in any way. So while we were having all these children year after year, we also started a business, very, very small when we started, and to say it was challenging truly is an understatement, because financially, we just kind of, I think we had probably $10,000 we threw into it, and we went into debt, and we were working many, many hours. I was home a lot with the children. He was trying to figure out how to get it started. And so when I talk about, business and startup, I have so much respect and so much, it's really, when somebody starts something and pursues their dream, to me, it speaks volumes for somebody's character, because it takes determination and it takes just grit. And you have to really be in for the long haul when you do it. And sometimes it works, and sometimes businesses and dreams, they don't work. So I think that compassion, when you go through things in life, you learn compassion, you learn understanding. And through those tough times there, when we were having, our children, our family, and when we were starting our business, when I say that it was challenging, that's an understatement in every aspect. Our relationship struggled because we were never together. We were always, quickly talking about just the high points. Financially, we were very strapped, trying to have children. And again, you can say, well, why didn't you stop? Why did we have more children? Well, when we were trying to have children and then we couldn't, and we were just feeling so blessed to have 3 children, 4 children, and then 5 children. It was kind of it was a wonderful time, but also it was an extremely challenging time during that time in our life. And I often refer to it as like married and kids, and it was chaos. We were very blessed at that time in our life, starting our meat market from absolutely nothing, financially, knowledge, business wise, and to be to who, after 30 years now in the business, to what we grew from, back then to now. I'm very proud, and it's not an arrogant proud because of what we've had to go through. It's just an appreciation, just an enormous, deep appreciation for the success that has come from it. And by the way, we have been nominated for, I think, the last 4 years for the best meat market in our area. So grit, determination, I don't know how else to explain those years. And that was, 5 children. And then we actually were like done. But I was 24 at the time, and we both, no more children. And I still got pregnant with number 6. And it was kind of, it was an unbelievable shock. I couldn't believe it, but it was the way it was. And we couldn't do life without that 6th child of ours. But after that, I was done. So I had 6 children by the time I was 25 years old. And again, very proud of that, but also it came with a price tag, not in the sense of like money, but also just, it was a very tough time in there. But very grateful, very thankful, during that time. Sometimes I look back on those years, they were very difficult, but with that being said, those difficult moments, and not, and financially not having a lot of money, we also needed our children to help us out. Just simply coming, taking garbages out, sweeping floors. One of the things that we chuckle about to this day is the younger one of the middle ones or younger ones, if they saw a car come driving up into, our parking lot, they would come back and tell us that there's a customer. we have cameras now, to let us know that there's people working up front all the time. But if we were in the back, we didn't know that there was somebody up front. So our children, it was their job to run back and tell us that there's somebody up front and that we had to go up front. So those are kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of embarrassing things, but that's the work ethic that was instilled into our children and at a very young age. And it just probably came from financially struggling. We just didn't have a lot of money to have employees. We always had a couple employees, but it's been a family business. From the very beginning, we didn't really know what we were doing. We just, when doors opened up, we followed it and we, went through those doors. And now we're a full, slaughtering facility. We have a full meat market where you can come in and purchase retail. And we have been recognized as the best meat market in our area. So with that being said, sometimes I look back and I think that was very difficult, but through that perseverance, that grit, that just kind of never giving up, actually did pay off. I'm very fortunate and very glad about that. But one thing in that time frame, it was inevitable that we were going to have to deal with the family dysfunction that I grew up in. So on top of having the children and starting a business, I was still dealing with actions that my dad was still doing to me. So I remember particularly one event that my husband and I and a sibling of mine and her husband were down at a wedding in a few hours away. And my parents had flown in from some vacation, a vacation that they were at. And when they got to the hotel, they were very intoxicated when they got there. And my husband and I and my sister and her husband were up in our suite, just having a good time, for that evening. We too were having a few drinks. And my mom and dad come up to the suite where we were at, and my dad instantly said to me, oh, he had forgotten something in his room. So we went down so he looked at me and he wanted me to come down with him. So I followed him down to his room, and that door to his hotel room wasn't even shut. And he had me pinned up against the wall and was kissing on my neck, like how my husband would kiss on me. And I was 28 probably at the time. I had 6 children already, and I just froze. I absolutely froze up. I left him do whatever he wanted to do. I don't know what he really wanted in his room. I can't remember any of that stuff, but I did the exact same thing that I always did when I was a child. I just locked up, left him do whatever he wanted, and then just zoned out, and we walked up to the room, back up to my husband, never told anybody ever anything that ever happened to me when I was a child or even as an adult when he would touch me and do stuff like that to me. It was just what I did. It was what I did when I was a child, and I just resorted back to doing that stuff even as an adult, as a wife and as a mother to all those children. It was horrific what I went through. But as anybody that turns around and looks back at their life, making it through, weathering storms, just putting one foot in front of the next during those struggles in our life, I look back on it, and that's exactly what I did during that time. But this is a pretty heavy part of my life, and I think it's only fair that my viewers know this and get to hear this part. And so, often I think about I'm a high school dropout. What gives me the right to be able to sit in this chair? I am not a psychiatrist. I'm not a counselor. I absolutely have not one letter, MD or whatever, behind my name. But I do have these obstacles and challenges that I've endured and I've weathered. And I'm extremely proud that I have weathered these things in my life because it has made me who I am today, and that is a strong, courageous, independent child of God. I am a Christian and I'm very faithful, and you're going to see that, and I'm sure you've seen it in the past episodes and throughout me talking or in episodes to come. It's intertwined with how I live, and I could not have made it through my life without my best friend, and that is Jesus Christ. And I'm so thankful that I do have him in my life. All right, so I told you that I'm going to be real. I'm going to be vulnerable as I navigate through my life and journeyed through my life. That family of origin that I grew up in, that dysfunction continued into my adult life. And, it wasn't all the time that he was preying on me like that, but he still, would touch me. He would want to always meet me at different places. And I honestly think that led up to what happened on March 6th of 2006. I had just turned 30 years old, so I had all my children. We had had our business for several years already, and him always wanting to touch me, always wanting to talk to me privately, and just different things like that, I think stirred up all of that stuff from when I was a child. And on March 6, 2006, that day will always and forever be etched in my memory, because it was my two sisters, my mom, and myself getting together. We very rarely did that because we all had, larger families. The children were young, so being able to get, babysitters lined up or whatever it was, so that it was just my two sisters, myself, and my mom. And we had just gotten together at my sister's place, and we were visiting. And for whatever reason, my mom brought up that she had a confession to make. Now, this is her story, and I'm not going to get into that part of it because that's her life. But I assumed that it was something to do with some abuse that she had dealt with when she was a child. And my body instantly just, it went into like panic mode. I started to relive what I had endured as a child at the hands of my dad. And I really never ever did say what had happened to my sisters and to my mom, but they probably kind of knew what it was. And that day, there's a lot of things that had happened, but I'm going to kind of fast forward you to that. In my family, with the religion that they had, the dysfunction in our home, they ostracized me because I had brought up a dysfunction in a home, and big families that are very, I'm going to use the word cultish, a little bit cultish, or cult-like symptoms. You never ever bring up dysfunction. You never talk about the sins or the things that are going on behind closed doors. So when it came out, I then, for the very first time, had to go home and tell my husband about this and what I had endured. And what I wanted was for us as a family to just get together and talk it over. It was very hard. It would have been very difficult to do that. But my parents refused, absolutely refused to acknowledge it. And it just slowly after, through that summer, it happened March 6th of 2006. Throughout that summer, we were going to the same church. They just kept, moving further and further away from me. And I couldn't go back to it. I couldn't allow what was happening. My body was just not going to let it happen. And they were not going to deal with it, and they didn't want to, they just kept ostracizing me. So one by one, each one of my siblings started to turn against me. And in the fall, it was, so from March all the way to October, there was a friend of mine that had told me that she was from our church, and she had kind of noticed that there was some things that, I'm not sure exactly what she noticed, but that there was something that was not right with me and my family. And she asked me about it, and I I didn't give her a lot of information, a lot of details about it, but I had said that, I had been sexually abused from my dad. And she said, Sarah, you need help. You need to talk to somebody about it. So I went to the crisis center, our local crisis center. I cannot say enough about what these people do at the crisis center. From the moment that I first got there, just being so scared, my anxiety, it was just, I hadn't talked to anybody about it except for my husband. My family of origin, they were all starting to leave me because I was bringing an issue up, and that's not what you do. So I really didn't have anybody to talk to about any of this stuff. And when you go to the crisis center, they're mandatory to report it. So then to the sheriff's department. Then it went to the sheriff's department, and I went right over to them and I gave a report. And from that point on, the state gets involved. And I think they went and talked to my dad, my mom. There was some confessions that were made. And the state ended up charging my dad out for sexual abuse. There was enough evidence. He had made a confession. That wasn't really where I wanted it to go. I wanted it to go just, to maybe perhaps keep it more private and see if we could work through as a family, and it wasn't happening. So the doors that happened to open, and when they went that direction, that was the way it was supposed to go. But when the state got involved, it was very, very difficult for me to understand it and to testify against your dad or a parent is extremely difficult. And when you're in that position, when you're a little child and that stuff is happening to you, abuse is happening to you, there is something, and it happens to every single I don't like to use the word victim, but every single victim, every single abused child, they take that shame on. They take that guilt on. So even as an adult, as a 30-year-old adult, I felt that shame and I felt that guilt yet because I had not worked through a lot of things. And I didn't understand things. I didn't have a healthy mind at that point in my life. And it's still very difficult for me to even say this, but it's the truth, and it's where I was at that moment in my life, because the family was ostracizing me, and I was carrying that guilt and that shame of the actual, of the abuse, and then. The state is who charged him out, but it was me that was carrying that guilt and shame at that time. And I actually was extremely mentally in a tough shape, really difficult at that time. And I was very close to, and I'm very sad and sorry that I did say this or did think this, but I was probably about 5 minutes away from making my children motherless. And I was with a very good friend of mine, and at that time when that happened, and it was October 28th of 2006, and she took me to the hospital, to the psych ward. And it was at that point, at my lowest and darkest moment of my life, because I probably wasn't mentally thinking correctly at that time. I was very depressed. I wasn't sleeping. I mean, it was a very difficult time in my life going through this. But that was probably the turning point in my life, being admitted to the psych ward, because that was when I started to, first off, I started taking some sleep medication. I was starting to get some sleep again. I was taking some, antidepressants, helping me, see correctly. And then the best and the biggest thing is that I actually did like an outpatient where I had some dear friends of mine from our church bring me to the hospital, to the classes. And I remember that very first day that I went there, I couldn't even tell them my name. I was just so, fearful. I was embarrassed. I was depressed. I was in a very bad spot in my life. But I told the psychiatrist, you have 1 week, because our busy season at our meat market was really getting busy at that time. And he said, how much time do I have with you? And I remember crying and saying, you have 1 week. And he said, all right, I've got 1 week. And that intense therapy that I went through, that was truly the beginning of the climb out. But that was actually really the beginning of all the legal stuff. So there was hearing after hearing, and it was pretty intense. I learned a tremendous amount about our court system, and working closely with sheriff's department, with detectives, with the DA, and really got to know them. But December of 2008, it went to trial. I had to testify against my offender, my dad. It was very difficult to do that. He was sitting there. And probably the saddest of all of it, and I couldn't be in the courtroom when this happened. I went in, I testified, and that was the only time I ever was in the courtroom, because they always want to keep you separated so you can't hear, what others are saying. But the saddest part of all of it was every single one of my siblings testified against me. And this is why I do use that word, a cultish family, because you never, ever say the things that happen behind closed doors. And they said stuff, to the effect that I was seeking attention. She's always been after attention. Anything that they could bring up. The fact that back in October of 2006, I had gone to the psych ward, they said that I was unstable. A lot of those things were extremely difficult and hard for me to work through once I heard it after the trial. And on December 17th, 2008, we were all called back in to get the verdict, and the jury came back that my dad was acquitted. So everything that I had gone through, staying strong to the truth, believing that truth would prevail, that I was doing the right thing. And I remember going back up to the district attorney's office, getting on my hands and knees, and just asking the Lord, why? Why did he put me through all of that so that my dad was acquitted? And it was difficult, to say the least. It was a very difficult time in my life. That night, it was December 18th, and in the state of Minnesota, there was snow on the ground. And I remember waking up the next morning, and my husband and I, we had to go to work, and there was beer bottles at the end of my driveway in a big circle. And in the middle of the circle was a little quote and it said, "When God is for you, who can be against you?" And that was what the family had sent and put out there. And I remember during that night, I was very heartbroken, but I was also, something changed in me, because what I had done was right. And I had to trust and believe that no matter what happened, that was the way it was supposed to go. And that for the first time in my life, I had to accept a defeat like I have never accepted a defeat in my life. But it was what had to happen for me to literally break away, from my parents, from my siblings, because when every one of those testified against me, it broke my heart. And I think probably the worst of all is that my mother had known all along when I was a child that I was being abused, and coming to that realization. And then when she was able to give me justice or bring justice for me, she left for 3 months during the trial, 3 months prior to it, and they were looking for her. There was an APB out for her, and in our area looking for her because we needed her. She had information that the district attorney, the prosecution needed, but they couldn't find her. And the attorneys went ahead. The judge said, let's go for it. Let's go with the trial. And she was one that could have brought justice for me, but she left and never gave that justice to me. That was a tough, that was really tough to accept that a mother would do that. And because I have such great love for my children and an understanding of a parent's love, I could not wrap my head around that. And then it was right before Christmas, and on Christmas Eve, I received a letter in the mail from Santa Claus from the North Pole, and it was addressed to Sarah Bachmann. And in that letter, in that envelope, was a local newspaper clipping that my dad had been acquitted. And it was my Christmas present to me from my family. I will say that some of those things that happen, it made me see clearly the level of intent to hurt me. And I think I needed that for me to really make a clean break. And that is exactly what happened. I can say, sitting here today, I am so thankful that I weathered that and I went through that. I did stand for truth. I did what I was supposed to do. My children witnessed what I did and what I had to endure. Many of my friends and community members supported me, believed in me, and knew that I was saying the truth, and how I weathered that and accepted what came my way in life. And wasn't bitter, wasn't angry. Did I question things? Of course I questioned things. And, we all do. But at that time in my life, I learned how to accept things as they come, good and bad. But also realizing that was a great gift and a great blessing to me to literally get me out of that family of origin of mine. So through that difficult time in my life, I honestly, truly am being created to who I am today. And I've said this many times, I'm very proud of who I am today. But it's because of the things that I've had to go through. So that is one of the major changing turning points in my life. It's how I actually got out of there. And I'm very thankful about that. So there was a quote that I read many times as I was going through that time in my life, and I'm just going to read this to you. Family dysfunction rolls down from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to their ancestors and spares the children that follow. Breaking the cycle of a generational cycle is extremely difficult. And when I hear stories of people doing that, of individuals, man or woman, breaking cycles, I have such great respect for them because that is not easy to break that generational cycle. All right, so weathering all of that and was difficult. But what I also found after going through all of that, the not guilty verdict and, getting through that tough time, another difficult time is just relearning who I really am. And, when you're in that lifestyle of a certain way, a belief system, it's like you have an entirely new life to learn. And that's exactly how I felt. I remember explaining it to my husband at the time, saying that I was like picked up from one country and put into another. And I had to learn, literally an entirely new belief system, how to view things and process things and think through it. And that's why I think it's so, I'm so emphatic about making sure that you when you're going through something, to process it, every angle. And if if you do that, like by yourself, if it's very traumatic and a very big deal, you're going to need to seek some help. And it doesn't mean like you need a psychiatrist or a counselor. Sometimes just having like 2 or 3 really good, solid friends that you can trust, that helped me immensely, is just to talk through it, process through it. And, so I am a huge advocate for processing through events in your life. And I can't talk on that enough, that it's so profound and it's so impactful to do that. And the way I view it, it's a must. You absolutely must process through difficult times. What's difficult about childhood trauma is that when you're a child and you're not capable to process stuff. So then the enormous amount of trauma that you have, what levels, what degrees, you bring that into your adult life. That's when it gets to be very difficult, because you were a child. It's like when I look back on allowing my dad, when I was an adult, married woman with 6 children, and I allowed my dad to do that to me. I remember struggling immensely with how to work through that. And how did I allow that? But it was because I resorted back to being a child again, and I just locked up, and I allowed him to do what he had always done. So he had groomed me from being little up to when I was an adult. And when he did that, I just went right back into and resorted right back to being a child again. That took me a long time and a lot of work to process that. So when I talk about processing, that's the difficult things that we have to process. The level of abuse or the level of trauma that happened. Let's say you lost a parent when you were a child. Let's say that you lost a sibling when you were a child. That was a very traumatic event when you were a child, but you weren't mentally capable to handle how to process that at that time. I assure you, it is going to come out somewhere in your adult life that you are going to have to work through that. And it doesn't mean you have to go to a psych ward. It doesn't mean you have to go to a psychiatrist or a counselor. It could just be your spouse. It could be a partner. It just could be a really good, trustworthy friend. But I assure you, it is going to come up somewhere in your life, some traumatic events like that. As a child, it's going to come up in your adult life. So I cannot say it enough that processing through things in life are extremely important. So relearning who I was at that time, that was very challenging. It brought my husband and I very close during that time, and I'm very thankful about that. And there was one thing I remember a counselor telling me at that time about. It was during a really, really cold winter time. And in the state of Minnesota where I live, there's this thing called real feel temperature. So if you look out on your thermometer and the thermometer says that it's 35 degrees out, 30 degrees, but there's a 25 to 30 mile an hour wind, it is not the temperature, the real feel temperature that you're going to feel on your skin is not 30 or 35 degrees. It could be down to 10 degrees. Or let's say that the thermometer outside says that it's 10 degrees and there's a 35 mile an hour wind. It is like 13 below. The actual real feel temperature is 13 below. And I remember, and I'm sure most of my viewers all understand this and knew this, but it was probably about 15 years ago. I was going through some tough times and trying to process some things. And I remember learning about real feel temperature. And I just put that together with I have to be honest with my real feel temperature, with my feelings, that whatever is happening in my life, if it's really things are really topsy-turvy, or there's some things that are going on, that I have to be honest with my temperature, that real feel temperature. And it might not make sense to you, but at that time, it made sense to me that I have to be honest with my real feel temperature. So that was just a little, I remember that profoundly, that I remember saying to myself, being honest with my real feel temperature. But maybe that's just because I'm from the state of Minnesota, and things get very cold in the winter months. I also will say trustworthy friends really did save my life. And to the friend that took me to the hospital, and to the psych ward that day, to the individual at my church that, came to me, saw that I was struggling with some things in family. When you go through things, you have a tough time. When you go through things as a child, you have a tough time trusting people. And I will always, I think to the day I die, have a problem with trust. But because the people that I was supposed to trust the most when I was a child were the ones that left me down the most. So you can't really blame me. I can't blame myself for having a trust problem. But looking back on the different stages of my life, it was truly trustworthy friends that saved my life. And just remember, when somebody comes to you and they trust you, they're sharing an issue or a struggle that they're going through. Sometimes we repeat things to others. We might want to gossip. That is like the worst thing that you can do. Be a trustworthy friend. If somebody shares something with you, just, you don't want to go and spread that elsewhere. Keep it private. Give them a safe space, a place to share it, not judge them, not tell them what they should and shouldn't do. Just being, I think the biggest thing is just a listening ear. Just listening is, and if they're asking for something, to the best of your ability, do what you can. But trustworthy friends, I can honestly look back on my life and say they saved my life. So it's extremely important to, when you're not maybe the one going through that trauma or the traumatic event or whatever it is, a challenge in your life, that being there for somebody else is extremely important. And then I think a lot of you also know that after weathering all of that, I also lost, after 29 years and 2 months, I lost Brad, my best friend. That was a very difficult time. It was in October 3rd of 2021. He passed away from COVID. And it was, I really couldn't believe that the Lord was going to take my best friend, my business partner, the father of my children, and take him home. And but I'm very grateful for the things that I had been through in my life, because it prepared me for accepting what was going to happen when Brad passed away. And I think age helps you. I think deep understanding of things in life helps you weather some storms. It doesn't mean that it wasn't difficult for me. I will tell you, it was those 3 weeks in there, we weren't allowed to come and visit Brad at that time because of COVID and the restrictions. It was excruciating. It was torture for the family and I, that, we weren't able to go and visit him and be an advocate for him and make sure he was, eating. Or I remember him calling me and he'd be crying because he was depressed. He had lost so much weight. And I would always be strong with him on the phone. And I remember getting off the phone and just, laying on the floor, spread eagle. And I didn't want him to see that. But I mean, that was the state I was in. And it was extremely difficult to, to go through that. So when, Brad, I think it was September 15th or September 8th, I brought him into the hospital, and he had been sick for maybe 4 or 5 days prior to that. And he just kept getting worse really quickly. So when we brought him in, I dropped him off, and then I went out and sat in the truck in the parking lot of the hospital parking lot for 4.5 hours. And then an ICU nurse called me, and he said, the nurse said that Brad had pneumonia in both lungs. There was clots that were there already. So COVID had hit him extremely hard, and by the time I had brought him in already. And he was vented on September 15th. We were allowed 4 minutes. The doctor called that morning on September 15th and said that they're going to be venting him, and that we had an hour to get there, and it took a little over an hour. But we all did make it there. Myself and my 6 children, 2 at a time, got to go in there. We had to suit up and say goodbye to Brad, and we didn't know that that was the last time we were ever going to see him alive. And the last words that Brad ever said to me it wasn't, "I love you." We were in the middle of developing some property, a side dream that Brad and I had always worked on, or had purchased some property adjacent to our home place here, and we were developing it, and it was going to be a little bit of a retirement project for years down the road. And the last thing he said to me was, "I want to see the North 40 finished." And I said to him, "Brad, I promise you I'll get that North 40 finished." And little did I know that day that literally was a gift from above, because after Brad died, when you give a loved one a promise, you're going to follow through with it. And so when I talk about a land project that and some of you viewers, maybe I haven't talked about it on Real Feel Insights, but Sunnyvale is what it's called, and it's land development that we were working on, and I never gave up on that. I am building units on it and renting those out, and it's been so much fun. It's been sad because I always say, I wonder what he would do or what he was thinking, but nonetheless, I am pursuing that dream, and I will fulfill that promise that I made to Brad, and it's been a real treat and a real gift for me to find some happiness. And truly, that was actually what got me off the ground again, is making commitments to pursuing that dream of ours. It was very difficult watching my children go through the loss of their dad, and at the time we had 2 grandchildren. One of our children have gotten married since then. We've had more grandchildren, and as each one comes, it's always a bittersweet. I wish that he would be here, but also at the same time, I know he's home, and when I say home, he's in his heavenly home, and that brings me great peace, that's where he's at, and great sadness, but great peace. So when there's discussions that come up with my guests, and there's difficult topics that my guests bring up, or great accomplishments, on Real Feel Insights, I feel it. I feel it from the heart. I'm happy, truly happy for them when there's accomplishments, and I carry their deep sorrow heavily too. And I think that I often ask, why is there struggles and pain in life? And my only conclusion is, from my own stories and my own life, everything that I've ever weathered and that I've gone through, it made me more compassionate, more understanding of others and what others are going through. So when I talk about Real Feel Insights, where it comes from and how it originated, it's because I feel such a need that we do need to be vulnerable, that we do need to be honest. We do need to share some of those struggles in life, because what it is doing is helping others. The other thing too is I have to, and I'm not terribly old, but when I look back on my life and reflect on it, I often think, am I truly a success? Am I truly a success story? I didn't have the best childhood. I'm a high school dropout. I've been embarrassed my whole life about that. I have weathered some serious financial issues, and I'm a widow. I'm 46 years old. 4 years ago now, Brad passed away. I'm now a widow. And does that sound like success to you? Does that sound like success to me? And I sometimes think when we hear the word success, we think of We think of big accomplishments. We think of financial, status. We think of financial, where we want to be to feel comfortable financially. I think sometimes we need to maybe put that word success back into perspective. And I think I am the most successful person on earth. And it's not because of what I have, but it's because of what I've been through, that I've weathered those storms. That I am a business owner, and it's a successful business owner. Yes, in the financial, if you want to think of it like that. But I think of it more as a 30-year successful business, and being able to talk about the hardships through that we weathered those. And it's a family business. I have children that I'm going to be turning it over to shortly. And that's the success I'm talking about. And the love that people have for me and that I have for people, to me, that is success. That is the greatest success. Because when I had to say goodbye to Brad and literally watch him take his last breath, he couldn't take anything with him. But what he left behind was integrity, good character. That to me is what success is. That to me is what I'm proud of. So we have to always remember, sometimes it's not what we think it is when we talk about success. So just looking forward to the future, having grandchildren are my greatest joy right now. I love them. I love for them to come and tell me their excitement. And my oldest grandson just lost his first tooth. I have so much to be thankful for and so much to look forward to. And it's exciting. My life is exciting. I have doors that are opening up, and the future has so much for me, and I'm just excited to see where that goes. In closing, I just felt it was very important for you as the viewers to probably kind of get to know me as the host and where I'm coming from, why I say what I say, and why I even had this dream to start Real Feel Insights. I hope that if I can help one person, just one person in any capacity, in any way, my mission is accomplished. And that is why it started. And I hope in me being vulnerable and sharing my story that I'm relatable, you understand me. And I hope that you continue to enjoy Real Feel Insights. I actually truly love producing this. I love doing this. I know that I am doing the right thing. I know that this dream of mine, I know that I'm going in the right direction. I feel good about it. I believe in it, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to just keep having fun, and we're going to see where it goes, and we hope you can just ride along the ride with us. So thank you for joining me, Sarah Bachmann, as your host, but also as a guest today. And I hope that you enjoyed it, and I appreciate you following us. Thank you.